Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah, coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praises to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother, who is wisdom, who is Holy Spirit. Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Prayer to the Most High blesses this lesson this afternoon, gives more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past, in order to understand the events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. This afternoon, we're going to be getting into this book right here, The Lost Outpost of Atlantis, talking about this guy, Father Crespi, who was getting a whole bunch of artifacts from the natives that were here down in South America and South and Central America. And he was bringing, these guys were just coming up with all of these artifacts from the so-called Middle East, as well as plenty of other places over there in the so-called, three parts. And they had a bunch of that stuff actually already over here. But one thing we're going to get into before we get into that is the whole notion of Egypt. Now, see, we can't just let these guys just slide on the fact that there was no evidence that there was a Egypt here until the late 1700s. I remember getting attacked about when I was getting into the whole, America as our homeland, and this couple here came up with the whole notion that Egypt is our anchor. Now, a little bit of research would have showed you that Egypt, there's no proof of Egypt before the late 1700s. And if these guys know that there's no proof that Egypt was here, if you can't prove that Egypt was here before the late 1700s, then how do you get it? How can you then say that Yahushua fled to this Egypt right here? How can you say that Joseph was there and that was where the whole dreams of the 7 years of feast and the 7 years of famine happened? How can you prove all that? How can you prove that Abraham, sojourned in these lands over there, or the lands over there in the so-called Middle East for all these numbers of years, going in and out of Egypt? Now I'm going to show you a quick little excerpt here from one of the pages where they're admitting that there's no proof that Egypt was there before the late 1700s. This guy's talking to him about Atlantis and the Atlantean theory. Okay, and so he's reading right here a little bit because it's a top Eastern at all, but Atlanteans, the same source from which the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Semites, and the Babylonians derived them. I pressed him for an explanation that might be more acceptable to traditional history. He responded that although he knew too well the animosity with which the upholders of established dogma view upstart theory. See, these people who have been given their marching orders for history, and they don't, and no one's allowed to come up with any other theories. They look at with animosity. They get upset, like just like they've said everything happened over there, but then when you bring up all these artifacts and all this proof that things actually originated over here, they look at you with animosity, and that's so true. When you start to actually bring out all the proof that these things are actually happening here, they get upset, or they just act like you're somehow crazy, even though they don't have. If you can't prove Egypt is like one of the main uh, cruxes of all of their theories of all these things happening over there. If they can't prove that Egypt was there before, then everything else falls apart. Everything else, doesn't have any legs to stand on. All their theories have no legs to stand on because yes, Egypt is central to many of the stories that are in the Bible. Okay, so if you can't prove that Egypt is the one, then that means we would have to go somewhere else. Okay, so let's continue reading here. All right, let's see here. He responded that although he knew too well the animosity with which the upholders of established dogma view upstart theory, no other view could account for so much archaeological, zoological, and written evidence. I mentioned that I had never heard a satisfactory explanation of Egypt's apparent sudden arrival on the Nile as a full fledged civilization. Valentine nodded at me. So all they do is he says and tells me, I have never received a satisfactory explanation of Egypt's apparent sudden arrival on the Nile as a full-fledged civilization. And this dude just nods at him, like, yeah, I know. I know there's really no evidence that Egypt was here before. Yeah, I know. It just kind of seems like it's just all made up. But see, that's the thing. When they're in charge, they've been able to do this entire time. Never really explained anything, just nodded that, yeah, I know that can be a problem. Well, that's a huge issue. That's a huge problem. So, like I said, when they're making all these, like, that's kind of like how they look at us now. When we say we're the real Hebrews, they just nod. They don't try to prove it wrong. They just kind of look at you, but they don't try to disprove it because they know they can't. They can't prove now. Like I said, so when they're all on the offensive talking to us, like, hey, I got a couple of comments that was like, hey, where's Jerusalem? Where's uh, Eden? Where's Babylon? Where's Rome? Where's all these things? Well, you can just come and say, well, prove to me where was Egypt at? If you can't prove Egypt, if you can't prove that Egypt was over here, and it just miraculously just popped up as a full-fledged civilization all of a sudden, then you've got problems. See, they got to prove. They're the ones that said everything happened over there. So if they're going to be making those claims when there's so much evidence of things happening over here, I said they need to prove it. You guys need to prove Egypt over there. Now, if you can't find anything before 1790s, when Napoleon got there, then pretty much a lot of all of the stuff that you have been saying is all false. So, like I said, that's why we're getting into these other, these other avenues, these other, things that we need to be talking about right now. So we can't just be always be just studying and just kind of going off the news and going off with everything. There's other topics that we need to continue to hit, continue to make, bring to light. And this information right here that Egypt just sprang out of nowhere, that's a huge problem. If you're just saying that Egypt just spread out of nowhere and you have no proof, but we're supposed to listen to you, and if you can say that with a straight face, then what else are you lying to us about? Like I said, you now looking at all these books. I have to take a picture of one of my old Bibles that I had when I was growing up. I'm sure many of you guys did too, and it shows like Egypt, and it's all white people, and that's how they just been destroying our minds since we were little kids. I said, the Egyptians were white, and, Mary and Joseph and Jesus going there to hide, and they're all white. Queen of Sheba's white in the other magazines. So they, just destroy our minds when we're young, and we don't put two and two together. That just makes absolutely no sense. Well, now, they've been saying that Egypt was over there, and this guy's right here is just admitting that, yeah, that's kind of hard to prove because they know that that's not true. They know that it just how does a civilization that's supposedly, been there the whole time, been so technologically advanced, but there's no history of it. But everyone else, as my boy UBTV says, that they all agree on one thing. They all agree that this has been there for tens of thousands, for a very long time. They all can agree with that it's been there, thousands and thousands of years. They can all agree on that, but there's no proof. See, these people have been operating on an entire system, a whole dogma that has no proof, has no legs, has no foundation. And now at the end, the Most High is bringing this knowledge and understanding out so that we understand and that we can show that, hey, you guys need to prove this stuff. But as you can see, you're not seeing anybody try to come and prove it. You're not seeing anyone trying to come and disprove the information. You're not seeing people who've been attacking the whole time. You're not seeing them come and make videos that shows how Egypt was there thousands of years ago. Because if they could, they already would have, but they know that they can't. All praise is the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother, who is wisdom, who is Holy Spirit. Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.